When you think of great TV shows, you might think of the likes of Breaking Bad, The Sopranos, Better Call Saul, Rugrats. See, now those shows might be good, but they don't even hold a candle to even one episode of... Now, like most people, I stumbled upon The Rookie during one of my hourly TikTok doom scrolling sessions. I then inadvertently ended up watching a whole season of The Rookie the way God intended.
A room, then roll call.
You need to present yourself to the captain first. Down the hall, up the stairs. Can I help you?
Officer John Nolan reporting for duty.
I love this show. It was after a few months of me seeing clips of The Rookie that I realized I own a TV. So I paid for Hulu, and I ended up watching all of The Rookie in about a month. Maybe less, maybe more. I don't know, I lost track of time. And you wanna know what happened after I Googled the release date of season 8 and I realized that it's not coming anytime soon? Most other people would probably go on to watch a different show. Me? I just restarted episode 1. And the first thing I noticed is that this isn't the show that I was watching towards the end. And I don't really see a lot of discourse about this. I don't really see a lot of articles online. You try to search this and you don't really see much about it. In season 6, you had John Nolan thwarting an international terrorist organization that blew up the Federal Reserve and stole how many million in digital currency? But that wasn't even the real thing. It was all a ploy for them to gain access to government files, secret government files, and to grant that access to a lawyer turned criminal mastermind, the likes of which the world has never seen. And she does it in heels the whole time. Now, comparing that to season 1, there's a whole episode in season 1 dedicated to John Nolan shooting one guy. And it is one of the most grounded, realistic and emotional episodes this show has produced. I could probably go on and on about how this show has fully lost the plot and has forgotten what it was originally supposed to be. And if you don't believe me, you need to rewatch season 1 or just keep watching this video. The show begins with Rick Castle in the midst of his midlife crisis, finding himself caught in a bank robbery. Now, because he is still Rick Castle, he is able to stall the robbers long enough for law enforcement to arrive at the scene. Seeing how the police officers handled this situation and gave Nolan props, not Nolan, and Castle seeing the police officers roll up and take control of the situation and feeling like a hero himself in the moment, awoke something in him where he wanted to now become a police officer at the ripe age of 60, 55, 40. He's not, I don't know. It is at this point where Rick Castle becomes John Nolan. Now, instead of staying where he was and becoming a police officer there, he decides to move all the way to LA and put himself in a criminal amount of debt just to become a police officer. Also, again, noting this man is 50. How did he pass police training?
Never mind, this show is based off a real life person.
Right at the beginning of the show, we're introduced to my favorite character in this whole show, mainstay character, the anchor character of this whole show, Captain Anderson. I'm sure nothing's gonna happen to her. John Castle is then partnered up with Bishop, who will also be a mainstay character for the rest of the show. During this whole episode, we're also introduced to the rest of the cast: Lucy Chen, Tim Bradford, Lopez, Sergeant Gray, and another mainstay in Jackson West. There are a lot of standout moments in this whole season. You have true, real, moral, and philosophical questions being asked almost every episode. Somewhat. In the episodes that they do, it's very cool. There's episodes where the whole motif, are bad people inherently bad, or are people inherently good but driven to do bad things? And what role policing takes place in that? Is it their judgment call to hold the law up? Going so far as to ask the question if policing can ever even be moral. And how much of a role do police officers play and how justice is served. This motif is carried on in this season with the storyline of Tim Bradford and his wife Isabel. Tim Bradford is introduced as a man that sees the law as black and white. He was an ex-army soldier, and apparently, if I'm remembering the lore correctly, he led things in Afghanistan. But this character, who is built up right at the beginning that he doesn't care about morals. The law is black and white. If a person does wrong, he will be served justice. We are then shown that he has a wife who used to be a police officer, who ended up going into undercover work, which led to her getting addicted to drugs and constantly getting into trouble. And you see Tim Bradford pulling strings for her, which puts the morality of police officers into question again, which is a really cool and interesting dynamic that I feel the rest of this show just lost towards the later seasons, which I'm honestly really sad about. There's a few episodes that stuck with me after I got onto the later seasons where I would still remember them. The fact that most of the memorable episodes, and 2 of the highest rated episodes also, are in the first season of the show. And one of the most grounded and emotional episodes of this show is called Time of Death. This episode starts out very lightheartedly, almost uncharacteristically lighthearted, if I'm being honest. Maybe they kept it this way because of obviously things to come in this episode, but it starts with them solving an escape room, essentially. I'm talking about John and Talia. It's one of the rare moments we see Bishop actually be fun, and I'm sure we get to see more of this in the future seasons, right? But after the intro, Nolan and Bishop are going to a silent alarm call. They walk in and they see that the store is actually getting robbed by 2 individuals. The ensuing pursuit ends up leading to a random stranger's house, which the robber has ran into. He's about to take a man hostage, but then he runs up into the room. He's facing the window trying to escape when Nolan stops him. As soon as the robber turns 180 and shows his gun, ready to shoot Nolan, Nolan fires. And this whole episode takes a drastic turn. You can immediately see Talia running up. Nolan calls for an ambulance for a gunshot victim, but Talia checks the body and cancels the ambulance because the guy passed away, which it's kind of stupid because they will still need the ambulance to transport the body. This episode really puts into perspective the mental toll policing takes on an individual. This is showing the reality of people in this line of work, where not daily, but there are situations where they have to make choices like this. What is the morality of killing someone that wants to kill you? Quoting my main man Kratos,
Father, is it always moral to kill something that's trying to kill you?
Yes.
But after this turns a regular foot pursuit into a homicide case, and the lead suspect being Officer Nolan. Nolan is unable to answer any questions. He can't hear straight, he can't think straight. They have this really cool effect going across this whole episode where the background kind of shakes while Nolan is trying to get his thoughts together, which I wish they used more throughout the show. Again, there's so many parts where I wish they used more throughout the show. This episode goes over an internal investigation because unlike the rest of the show past the season, they took gun discharge very seriously in this one. I'm going to assume it's like that for most police officers in real life. During the moments after this shooting, my favorite character who I can't wait to see evolve past the season shows up and asks Nolan who he would like as his support officer throughout this process. And he chooses Gray. And this comes out seemingly out of left field because Gray throughout this whole season has been straight up hating on Nolan. Literally in the first episode, he says the words,
I don't like you, Officer Nolan. It's not personal. I hate what you represent.
This is the episode where we are also introduced to Commander West, who is the head of internal affairs and also the father of Jackson West. For all intents and purposes, Commander West is the best character, his actor, Michael Beach. Commander West, who's played by Michael Beach, is arguably the best acted character throughout this show. Some of his scenes in the later episodes or in the later seasons really keep the spirit alive of these first grounded, realistic season of The Rookie.
And see now that I made a mistake. But at the time, I did not think that it was in the department's best interest to disparage a fellow officer without additional evidence.
That is not your damn job! What does the placard say on my desk?
Commander, Internal Affairs.
This office is the only investigative unit required by the California Constitution. Do you know why? Because police officers are infused with the power of the state, the power to take a life in pursuit of justice, power that is all too easily abused. And yet at every turn, cops like you look at us like the enemy, the rat squad. How the hell do you expect me to root out problem cops when I'm sabotaged at every turn?
Whenever he shows up, it really reminds you of a time before. Towards the night, Lucy comes over to John's house to help him go through these trying times. And before we move forward, why did the writers think Chen and Nolan were a good pairing. This is one of the most awkward relationships I've seen on screen, and it doesn't help that with context of the later seasons with Lucy, that it makes it even more awkward. At night, while Nolan is chilling with the Canadian Idol, John is ambushed by the dead robber's brother to avenge the death of his brother's murder. John quickly takes care of him, but not before Chen audibly screams at the dude, which causes another problem. Chen can't let anyone know that she was in a relationship with Nolan, for a multitude of reasons. One being, workplaces are the most toxic environment that America and the Western civilization has produced. So this causes Chen and Nolan to start lying to Eternal Affairs, and in turn to Commander West. This episode seemingly morphs from fighting with the morals of killing someone who is killing you to the morality of lying. This show's first season really did teeter on the gray area of everything. In the end, Nolan's lie works, Commander West believes him, and clears Nolan for active duty again. And again, let's compare this to season 7. During my extensive research, I couldn't really find anything linking to why the show really switched up this way. I know I keep pointing this out, but the fact that one season has an episode talking about one bullet being discharged, to now Nolan leading international recovery missions? My best guess is that the show started on a tiny budget, so they decided to keep it grounded, but as soon as season 1 took off in the way it did and they got all that money from NBC, ABC, whoever produces this show, and also that sweet syndication money started rolling in, they decided to ditch that whole groundedness and just become another cop show. It still boggles my mind that in the later seasons, there's this lawyer, which was just introduced as Wesley's arch nemesis, turns out to become the single most important and evil villain in the entire world. She went from a person who was just defending Elijah Stone and then ended up kind of becoming like a comedy character who would constantly butt into whichever person Angela was interrogating at the time, to then end up stealing government files in that aforementioned Federal Reserve heist, which then ended up with her coercing a deal with the US government to get immunity. Let's talk about another good episode in season 1. Greenlight is tied to be the best episode of this whole show, and for a good reason. This episode takes place during an annual test that Internal Affairs runs on the LAPD. They end up setting fake events for police officers to roll up to so that they can gauge the integrity of cops and if they're doing good police work or not.
What's a reversal?
Where cops go undercover to rat out other cops.
IA officers will be...
So due to all of this, all the cops on patrol are on edge the whole time, questioning every caller getting called to. The most paranoid one out of all of this is my main man, Tim Bradford. This whole situation leads to one of the corniest but funniest Bradford moments. He pulls up to a routine traffic stop with a guy drunk driving, and while he was talking to the guy, he looks behind him and sees a detective from IA and realizes that this stop is bogus. Instead of just letting the guy go and talking with the detective, this guy decided to throw the entire book of the law on this one guy and then called it a day.
I can go. Write him up. Reckless driving, giving false information to a police officer, disobedience to traffic signs, unlawful act with a green air sticker, driving with an obstructed view, unnecessary use of horn, failure to exercise caution when passing animals. Is he serious?
It's during this where Nolan and Bishop get called to a country club to take care of an altercation between a girl and a valet driver. As they roll up, they see the woman screaming at the valet driver, accusing him of scratching her car, keyword scratch. And because during this, the lady doesn't end up calming down, Nolan has to end up arresting her and cuffing her. And during this process, Nolan accidentally rips her dress off. Not off, just rips the dress. The lady ends up basically threatening Nolan, which Nolan ends up just brushing off because probably he gets threatened every day. It turns out that this lady is affiliated with a street gang, and this street gang ends up putting a hit out for Nolan, leading Nolan to be greenlit. And side note, for how grounded season 1 is, I don't know how he survived this shootout. This causes Nolan to be taken off active duty because he's literally a danger to the whole police department. This ends up leading Gray to go to prison to question the guy whose son is running the street gang that put out the hit on Nolan. Officially, this causes the hit to be called off, but because his son is, I don't know, a piece of shit, he's still unofficially greenlit. Nolan, even while he was officially greenlit, decided to come back to active police duty to be a hero, I would assume, or to kind of prove that nothing scares a police officer, I guess. Because Nolan is still kind of a threat to the department, my favorite long-lasting and genre-defining character, Captain Anderson, decides to ride along with Nolan today. They get called to a house which seems empty. It ends up with Nolan and Anderson getting flashbanged, knocked out, and then tied to a chair right on the edge of a pool. Essentially how this ends is Anderson ends up telling the leader of the gang that basically he messed up and he kidnapped a captain of the police. No matter what happens here, he's gonna be hunted down the rest of his life. This guy ends up not giving a shit, which is respect. So because this guy follows the teachings of if you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound, he decides to kick Anderson into the pool, essentially killing her. This causes Nolan to start panicking and telling the guy he will do anything for him to take Anderson out of the pool. And then he ends up making Nolan record an apology to the girl whose dress he ripped. But during all this, because Anderson is the best, longest lasting character of this whole show, she breaks out of the chair underwater, pulls the guy nearest to the pool down, kills him in the pool, gets his gun, and then shoots everyone around her, and then ends up saving herself and Nolan and put an end to Nolan's Greenlight. That's what I would have said if it wasn't for...
No!
This episode does kind of leave the groundedness a lot, but it still does something that the show just does not have the balls to do today, unless it's dictated by real life circumstances. They killed off Anderson. Why? Is her name even Anderson? Because they could. Because they wanted to keep their audience on their toes. They didn't want you to get attached to a character because they wanted you to believe that at any moment they could be gone forever, which is obviously a parallel to real life. And it's also doubly cool because this wasn't even a special episode in the show. This wasn't like a season finale or a mid-season finale. This is just a random episode. They can't do this anymore for several reasons, most mainly relating to money, if I'm being honest. But all the characters they do end up killing off, or the only character they really killed off was West because he left the show. Thorson left the show, or rather he was kicked out because they believe his character arc had come to an end, which is frankly BS.
What I meant to say was, even when an actor leaves the show, they don't even kill them off. They just write him off.
But it's just something that really, really annoys me about the later seasons of the show, because I like the show for what it is, but rewatching season 1 really made me realize what we lost, what we could have had in this show, even though it's still a really good show and you should definitely watch it. If you're like me and you just finished season 7 of The Rookie and don't know what to watch, watch The Rookie again. I'm not even kidding. I think it's legitimately a different show, and it really got me to appreciate the beginnings of John Nolan and what he turns into later on. Am I thinking too much about the show? Am I looking at a shallow puddle expecting the depth of an ocean? Maybe, but this season did provide that illusion, and it's unfortunate that we lost this part of the show and instead we're left with John Nolan, Super Cop. Well, at least I get to see Bishop in season 2, right?